everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave. It's Jem here. Today we are going to get our paint on, and what I have done, I can't remember what order these videos are in, my brain's frazzled as you can imagine, there's a lot going on. I have put together a travel watercolour kit, and it's really just to tide me over until I get the cave set up properly in the new place. And today I just want to test it out as a travel kit just to see how much we can actually do with it, and I have a specific project in mind. Now the irony is not lost on me that it is a travel kit and I'm doing it at the desk in the cave, but everything's more or less packed up. So I have the Winsor Newton Professional Travel Field Box, and I have said this already, but I'm going to do a separate video comparing the professional Winsor Newton paints to the Cotman paints, so that'll be a video that we'll do once we're in the new place. In addition to that, I have this lovely little dinky Arteza watercolour sketchbook, and I actually really like the paper in it. I have swatched out the field set already and the paper just feels lovely. So we're going to give this a bash today and we're going to do a little bit of painting. So let's get to top down view and we can get going. Okay, so the idea is today to try and use these paints in as a travel setup, as in the way it's intended to be used. So I've already filled up my little reservoir here. Now one of the things I would do if I was travelling, which I may have to do a little bit more of once we move because we're moving further north, is I would always carry a little rag with me like this, and my dogs are fighting and playing together again. This always happens when I film videos. Can you two be quiet please? And yeah, that's something that I would always carry with me anyway, in addition to this little setup. So I want to see how well I get on with the sponge situation because I think that would be interesting. So the other thing here is I haven't unwrapped the white. I think what I would do is actually switch out that white for another colour that I'm more likely to use, probably another green. So dunk my water in there and then dip the sponge in there. And pop the lid back in this. I've only put about half the water in, so there's still some left in there if I want some clean water later. And by popping that back in there, that gives me an extra palette to work with as well. And this clips on here. So you can use, there's a thumb loop underneath, which I should have showed you before I did this. So you could actually have it like this and you could use it that way. Even if I'm painting and I'm elsewhere, I prefer to have at least one flat surface to work on, even if it's my sketchbook in my lap and then my palette somewhere else, you know, like resting somewhere else. That's just a personal preference. So we're going to see how this goes. So I've got my little brush here. Now the other thing that I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to turn this round this way, and that's just so that my hand isn't hampered by this, because this actually sits quite far up because of how deep it is, and trying to get in here is going to be a bit of a fiddle, and I'm going to end up dipping my hand in this sponge. So I think just by turning it that way I'm going to get on a little bit better, but we'll try it out. This is the whole point of this, and see how we get on. So I have already swatched out the colours that come in this, and as you can see they're very vibrant, they're lovely, and this was for Instagram. So we've got two blank pages here that are side by side. One of the things that I want to do this year with my painting is to up my tree game. When I paint in watercolour, I always do my trees exactly the same way, and I really want to try and expand on that now. I've decided that watercolour is a medium that I'd like to stick with, and one of the things I'd like to do is branch out with my trees. Get it? Okay, the bad jokes have started already and we're only 3 minutes in. This is going to be a good video. So what I've done is I did a little sketchbook study of different types of trees, and I just sort of took an evening to myself and got loads of pictures off of Google and Pinterest, that kind of thing, and looked at lots of different tree shapes. And I also went outside onto the farm and took some photographs and went for a walk with my dogs and really looked at the different types of trees to get some ideas. There's a couple that I want to try, but just to give it a sort of reference image, I'm going to start with what I would normally do, you know, like one of my normal trees. So I'm just going to use the sort of straight colour that is in this palette to begin with, so that we can get an idea of what we're dealing with here, because I do want to get a feel for this little paintbrush. And I have to say it does feel quite good quality, which I'm quite happy using Winsor Newton supplies. I quite like their their art supplies, and it's really nice to have this little brush. I am a considerable fan. I just keep thinking I just keep thinking back to the scroller box that we had recently, and it had like a Van Gogh travel brush in it, and it was possibly one of the worst travel brushes I've ever used in my life. It was just awful. And it kept coming apart where you join it together, you know, once you've unfolded it, it just kept coming apart, and it was so frustrating when I was trying to use it. Okay, so when I am painting trees, I always start with these sort of main branches, and I think it's just the natural shape that my hand chooses to take, but my branches always seem to be the same sort of style and shape. You know, I have trouble sort of randomising the shape of the branches, and this happens to me quite a lot. I'll dump some of this onto here. The one thing that I'm not going to enjoy about this palette, and it's the same with all travel palettes, is I don't actually like mixing colours on plastic palettes, and it's because they stain, and it makes your little travel kit look grubby really quickly. But that's what it's meant for, that's its purpose, so I'm just going to get over that hurdle and deal with it. When I'm painting at home, normally I prefer ceramic palettes because the colour, the actual paint sits better on it. It's a lot easier to mix colours and it doesn't all bead up like this. I will take something a bit darker. I find it very difficult to gauge how much paint to mix when I'm working on plastic like this as well. It is something that I find quite difficult. And again, it's just inexperience with painting on the move, as it were. So let's get some more lines down. I have to say, for the price of these sketchbooks, I am super impressed with the quality of the paper in these. And so far, I would definitely recommend these little sketchbooks. I know they do bigger ones. I would be quite keen to try maybe a bigger one, but I've got these come in packs of two, these little Arteza ones, so I would be keen to use these up first. And if I was going to purchase them again, I'd maybe try a bigger one, and you know, as well as getting a little one. I keep forgetting about this little sponge here. Oh, that's just off shot. I'm trying to keep everything in shot for you as well. And I'll maybe mix up a green for some leaves. So I've got the permanent sap green is the colour that's available, and that looks a little bit like that. But I would also like to mix up a kind of darker version of that. So I'll pop that down there. The other thing that I'm kind of struggling with here as well is keeping your water clean. I suppose you can only do so much when you are travelling. If I was going to use this on a regular basis, I would swap out this black. What colour is this? I would swap out the ivory black for probably a Payne's grey. And I know that that's sort of limiting myself and making it very much, you know, a bluish tone. But I use Payne's grey a lot, and I use it a lot in coloured pencil as well. And I find it much more preferable over a straight black. So I don't know, again, I think it would depend what I was painting or what I was planning to paint when I was away. And that's the great thing, because you can take these pans out, they're, you know, you could interchange them as often as you like, as long as you had the actual pans available, and you could switch them out to suit your preference, which I think is a lovely thing about painting in pans. It's actually drying quite quickly. We're not quite there yet. Okay, I think while I'm waiting, I'll start on another chunk. And one of the types of trees that we have a lot of is these sort of fir-shaped, like evergreen type trees. So I just want to mix up some of this. Put some water in there. Try and get an evergreen type colour. Oh, this is going very viridian. That's good. So yeah, for the tree bark on this one, one thing I'm noticing, which is quite obvious from the get-go with this, is that these paints, compared to the Cotman paints, they feel a lot more concentrated, and they are a lot more vibrant, and especially with a colour like black, it's I'm finding it very difficult to gauge, and everything's looking very inky and black, so I think this is going to take a bit of work for me to get used to. So I'm just trying to mix a colour for the trunk of my pine stroke evergreen tree, and they are a sort of dirty greeny brown colour, but they're quite pale, so I don't know whether to water this down more, because I think it's almost an interesting shade. That looks quite good. Okay, we'll go with that. Let's get some leaves on the go over here. So I'm going to start with my sap green, and literally all I normally do is I just use this little sort of tapping motion to start putting leaves in, and I sort of jump about so that when I'm coming to the end of, you know, the actual paintbrush holding the paint, I can get the different concentrations, because as you lift your paintbrush it begins to, you know, the colour begins to lighten up as the paintbrush is letting go of the paint. So by alternating, and you do have to let these layers dry a little bit before you go back in, or else you just end up with a sort of bled in mess. And I usually just work my way round the tips of the branches and just move my brush to different angles to get this sort of leafy shape. Now this works best with quite a pointy paintbrush, and if your paintbrush, if you're anything like me, some of them start to lose that lovely sort of point on them, and then you just end up with blobs. So that's something that I find quite important for leaf painting. So just start blocking these in. And it's really up to you how far you take this. I usually lose patience and I could probably have more than I end up with, but it's really easy to go the other way as well and end up with like way too many leaves. So you can see already I've got some quite nice variation as the paint's starting to dry. Now this is quite heavy down here, and I've done that on purpose because you can see I've got a dark side of the trunk, so to me this would be the part that's maybe in shade, and I'll build that up a wee bit more as we go along. And I find trees are one of my favourite things to paint because there really is no right or wrong way to do it, and I do find it quite relaxing. I find it quite therapeutic myself. Maybe have a few little leaves that have got blown off in the wind or something. So the trunks of these trees are normally very straight up and down, and they're thinner at the top than they are at the bottom. So, and they don't seem to have much of a root system that sticks up above the ground, to a very fine point. It's very difficult to see some of the branches as well, but there are different types of these trees. And the one that we have, all the branches come up and they're quite uniform, but they all sort of head upwards. You know, they're all sort of pointing up towards the sky. The branches come out wider and wider and they give you that sort of triangle shape. I call it the Christmas tree shape. So this is just basically a case of drawing in, they look like little tridents. You know, there's lots of little forks like this. I'm sure somebody in the comments will be able to tell me what these are actually called. For someone that's always outside and spends a lot of time in nature, I do not know my plant names and things like that. It's something that I've just never really taken an interest in. I just know that they're nice to look at. So these ones are really all about getting the shape of the tree, you know, this first step in these branches. And if they overlap, then that's okay too. That's all the better sometimes. But we will go back in and add some more branches. And see, this is why it's fun. This is why I enjoy painting trees. I think we'll have one more branch here. Okay, so that's given us that nice triangle shape. So we'll let that dry for a little bit. And while we're doing that, I will go back over here. And I'm going to use this darker green now. Started to dry a little bit, but it's not bad. And then I can start adding in. Some of these ones down this side are actually still wet, so I'll be careful when I'm... If I had a full painting set up, when I'm finished with this, I would normally take a really light green wash, like really pale, and go over the area just to soften out some of the edges, but it depends on the picture you're painting as well. Sometimes I do it beforehand. If it's if it's like a forest type scene where there would be trees in behind, I would do it first. But if I'm just doing something like that, I sometimes do it at the end, and it gives it a nice soft feel to it. Obviously, just now, with only having this tiny brush, I wouldn't do it here because I would like a much bigger brush to do that with. Okay, so I want to focus now on the undersides of these branches and really getting some darker edges in here, and darker leaves. And again, you can actually go in with different colours. Sometimes it's nice to have more sort of bluey tones, and again, Payne's Grey is a colour that I would use particularly for the leaves that are maybe in behind or in the shadow area like I've been doing down here. I just want to build up a bit of a better shape at the top here. It's quite flat. I have been using the Winsor and Newton Cotman brushes, and I like them too, but they don't seem to be holding their shape very well, and I do use them a lot. You know, they are getting quite heavy use, but I'm still very much at the exploratory stage with paintbrushes. I've tried a couple of Kolinsky Sable brushes and I couldn't get on with them, and that's supposed to be the, you know, the sort of Rolls Royce of paintbrushes. I must be cheap. And maybe it's just practice as well, though I don't actually know. I'll probably keep trying though. Yeah, that's one thing. I know I try a lot of stuff on this channel. When it comes to art, I'm quite happy to be experimental, but I think even if your first impression of something like this isn't great, sometimes it's really beneficial to persevere, and you might find a method or a way of, you know, something that suits you better. And there's a lot to be said for that, and if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be watercolouring right now. So yeah, firm advocate of that. Right, I just want to build up a little bit more in here as well now, because we're looking kind of bare at the front here. And this is the lovely thing about watercolour, these layer up beautifully over the top of your tree trunk, and you can still see a little bit of the trunk through it, so you're not going to lose that shape. Okay, so that's looking pretty much like a tree that I would normally go for. Okay, so I want this really loose, this paint, and all I'm going to do is just what I was talking about earlier, where I am going to have my, well, it's pine needles in this instance, but where I'm going to have those, I'm just going to add in this little wash of this slightly bluey green, a stronger colour in the front to give those little needles some definition. But this just helps to bulk out what you're doing and, you know, make your tree look a little bit more substantial. And I can build this up as I go, but... Okay, so maybe we want to add in some more branches a bit closer to the trunk. Now, characteristically, there might not be a lot of these, but again, we don't want our tree to look bald, so we're going to go for it. You know, have these branches coming out, you know, from the front. And we can use this really dark green that we've already mixed up, and a tiny spot of black. Don't want to go crazy with the black. Now, into what I've got left here from the original colour from this trunk, I'm just going to add in a wee bit more colour to it, a little bit black. Oh, see what I mean about the black, good grief. Okay, that'll do. And again, I can do the same thing, I can just start adding in a little bit of texture. Now, it is quite a subtle colour difference, I've not gone crazy and gone for something completely different. And again, this is really about finding what you want, finding what looks good, but also just adding it in little stages. Okay, and building it up. Mix up a little bit of green again here. This tiny lick of blue. Oh, I'm going to have to learn to be really light-handed with this paint. Again, I'm just not used to it. I'm used to the Cotman paint, and this is definitely like a different ballgame. Like, I can tell the difference between the paints. Right now, that is it's really green. That's not what I was going for. Okay, that's looking quite good actually. This is what I'm going to use for my pine needles, and we want to start adding in all of our pine needles, and that is just really using the tip of the brush, making the same shapes that we've just been making actually, but just trying to be quite light-handed with them. So you can see it's starting to come together now, it's quite nice. Maybe zoom in a little bit. I say if you've got the patience to sit and go back over, by all means do it. I find it quite entertaining that I don't like repetitive things. You know, I don't like, when I'm colouring, I don't like colouring in mandalas or patterns. I find it very boring. And the same in like architecture, when I'm drawing something, I don't like drawing buildings with a lot of, you know, a lot of sort of intricate architecture. Yet doing this, I find this very therapeutic, and I could sit here and put these little needles on here all day. I'm really enjoying this colour of green as well. This is right up my alley. I'd really like to paint my lounge in my new house this colour, but Mr. Jem will not allow it. He does want green though, which is kind of cool. I did say to him though, we'll need to be careful or else we'll end up with the whole house being green, because if I had my way, that's what would happen. But the new cave will be green. It will be getting painted a sage green, which is my favourite colour, and I've always wanted this cave to be that colour. and I just never got around to it. And by the time I'd installed bookcases and things, they were all bolted to the walls, so I didn't want to have to pull all that off just to paint. So yeah, I'm quite excited about painting the cave. That's going to be good fun. So that's, as it stands, we're going to have a green living room and also a green cave. I'll say we'll maybe limit the use of green elsewhere in the house after that. It is quite a daunting task though, because literally every room in the new place needs decorated, unless you're a fan of magnolia paint, which I am definitely not, and having a dirty farmer husband and 3 dogs, magnolia and other pale colours, and I just do not get on. So the entire house needs decorated, and it's a lot of rooms. It is a big house and it's quite overwhelming, but I'm just going to go a room at a time. That's the plan. But it's when you see this vast expanse of rooms and you think to yourself, oh good grief. I've just dipped my bookmark in my green paint. Now, in Copic markers at one point I was doing a 3 marker challenge, and I did sort of like a cherry blossom type tree, and it sort of hung over. So I'd quite like to try and recreate that. And the one thing about those is that the trunks are quite dark, like the wood's quite dark. Not being familiar with the palette as well is something that obviously isn't helping right now, but this is why it's fun to do this stuff with you guys in the cave, because it's a safe environment to learn in. We can have a bit of fun, and it means you guys can learn from my mistakes. I say that quite a lot as well, don't I? It's true though. If you can learn something from what I'm doing without having to go through that discovery process yourself, unless of course that's something you enjoy, in which case be my guest. Okay, we're going to go with that. So I want to try and create this curve. I'm going to start over here just because this isn't quite dry. Some of them have got quite thin trunks. I don't know, I'm sure somebody again in the comments, some of you might be keen gardeners, you will be able to tell me if there's different varieties of cherry blossoms. I'm sure there are. But there seems to be this main trunk that comes up. I did actually just type into Google Leany Ovary cherry blossoms and it came up with some results. There you go. So if you want a bit of fun, type that into Google. Let's try and get some main branches in. And there's maybe like one that comes up here. Again, same principle. If you get your trunk in first and then you just start branching off your branches, you know, just build them up. Now that's pretty basic, but we don't need much more than that, truthfully. Or do we? Oh, maybe this is just one that's been bent over in the wind, I don't know. Okay, now so we need to mix up a really nice pink. Now we do have Winsor Red. If I pull this palette down again just for a minute, this is Winsor Red, which is what I would say is a true red, and then there's alizarin crimson, which most of you will know is a much sort of pinkier tone. So I think we'll use the alizarin as our base, and I might just have a couple of dilutions, you know, have like a really washed out one. So this is the alizarin crimson here. That is not easy to say. And I'm just going to plonk it up there so you can see how rich that is. Now this would actually, ironically, this would be the one time where I might employ some white, and that would be to give the paint a lovely sort of milky consistency, and that would, when we're putting down our leaves on top of our tree here, then they would stand out a bit more against this dark trunk. So that's quite an interesting point. Note to self, if you're ever going to paint cherry blossoms when you're away, take your white with you. Now these, when you see these trees from afar, that's so not light enough. When you see these trees from afar, it almost looks as if the leaves aren't actually attached to the branches in places. So I'm going to try and incorporate some of that. I'm going to move this down around here. You know, have them hanging down in sort of trails like this. And again, this is a bit like the first tree in that it's, you know, you're just going to have to take your time and build up the colour. Oh, there we go, that's looking quite pretty. There's no way I'm going to fit a tree in there. Okay, I'm just going to leave this to dry for a little minute. Pip is squeaking at me, so I think she needs out. So I shall return momentarily and we can start building this up. Alright, that's us. We've had a pee stop. That's feeling quite dry apart from this little blob here, but we can deal with that. So now I've got the more concentrated. Now all I've done is, I've not taken it straight from the palette, but you can see there's a part here that's starting to dry a wee bit, and it's a much more concentrated colour. So I'm just going to pop some of that down. And again, same as before, I'm almost on the tip of the brush though when I'm doing this. Oh, there's a bit of bleed, oh dear. But again, I'm not too fussy. I suppose it'll depend on your painting style. If you're wanting to keep a looser style, then you don't have to deliberate too much over this kind of thing. And I suppose as well, it depends whether it's the focal point of your picture or whether it's maybe, you know, in a landscape and it's in the background or that kind of thing. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to is just working away with watercolour and actually, you know, developing different techniques and styles. Because that's me, I've been watercolouring not quite a year. It's taken me that long to decide whether or not it's a medium that I like and whether or not it's something that I would want to do on a regular basis. And I've kind of decided that, yeah, that's, you know, that's very much the case. So I feel as if this second year of painting, it's time to try out different techniques and different styles and really sort of not develop my own style, because I do believe that that's something that just comes naturally and, you know, that develops over time. And it's something I experienced with writing. I didn't realise I had a writing style until someone pointed it out to me. So yeah, I think I need to maybe do some research and take some tutorials and stuff, because I really have just winged it, and I tend to do that with most things because I like to find things out by myself. But now that it's something I'm going to stick with, I think that's definitely something to be doing this year. Oh, that looks quite pretty. There we go, and that's us. We have a little cherry blossom. I'm going to try and squeeze one in here. I'm going to be brave. Alright, so for the last tree, and again this is a tree that I see quite a lot in our surrounding area, and they're very tall and very skinny, and they only have greenery at the very ends. Again, one should probably find out the name of these trees. So I'm going to continue on with this colour here, but I'm going to add a bit more of a sort of yellowy tint to it. Might as well experiment a little bit, see how this comes out. Oh, that's given me a nice sort of almost chocolatey brown colour. Ooh. I think sometimes it's fun just to see where paint takes you. You know, if you've got something left over in your palette like this. Now, the one that's in our garden, it has this sort of flowy trunk on one side. It's kind of squint, actually. And then it tapers off all of a sudden. And then it just starts to like branch out. So I'll just get some of these branches in first. There's one that sticks away out like this at this side, and then it kind of goes like this. And then it's got this really thick base. So I'm just taking advantage of this, and I'm just going to try and get some texture in and let these lines dry over the top of each other. It's what I would call a swishy trunk. It's got a swishy trunk. And again, I can use some black in here. I'll keep this on the periphery. Just mix that up a little bit there. And just try and get a little bit more interest in here. Now I'll need to leave that to dry. And maybe add in some grass. Some of these. You know, get some tufts on the go. Make them look as if they're attached to something. Pip's got her nylabone. I'm sure you can hear her. Maybe just add in some of this darker colour in here, and where at the bottom of the tree roots. Might be quite mossy in there. Maybe there's some animals living in there. And I have a feeling that although this is a pine type tree, maybe it's out on its own somewhere. It's not in a forest. Maybe it's at the edge of a field that's got some cows in it. So it's going to be mostly grass round about it. And we could maybe even put in a little fence in the background. Let's get some fence posts in up here. That's one of the things I've noticed that I do when I'm painting, and it doesn't matter what it is I'm painting, but I do start to make up like little stories about what's going on. Just a little simple fence in the background. Let's put some sky in as well. Let's get some blue on the go. Not that blue. You guys can't see that. Oh no. That's just outrageous. Let's water it down a little bit. Oh jeez. These colours are freaking ridiculous. Okay, let's just stick a wee wash in there. Look, there they are. These two trees are sharing their sky. They might not share their environment, but maybe they're in the same ballpark. I don't know. Why not? We're here anyway. I hope you guys are having fun too. I hope this is inspiring you to maybe go and do some trees. Even if paint's not your medium. Because I know some of you do watch that aren't painters. I am not a painter, just like to clarify that as usual. But, you know, maybe inspire you to do it in pencil, because I started mine in pencil, and I think, again, I say this all the time, but I do favour pencil, and I think I'll always favour pencil. There you go, that just makes them look a little bit less like trees that are just plonked on the sketchbook page. You know, we've got a wee bit of background there. I might even be a bit braver with this blue. This is a ridiculous shade of blue. What colour of blue is this? Winsor blue. I like Winsor blue, it's nice. Oh, my water's getting really dirty now, that's kind of tainted that a little bit. Okay, I think we'll leave them be like that. If I go back over here to our friend, I'm at the stage now where I'm just going to use what's left on the palette. I'm not going to start mixing up any more colours. So we've got this green, and the only way I can describe how this tree looks from a distance is it just looks like puffy clouds. It's almost like candy floss type look about it, kind of like this. That is not very, I'm trying to describe this as best I can, but it's just like big poofy piles of leaves that come off the branches. They're very dense, you know, they're obviously quite tightly packed together, and they remind me of candy floss on a stick. Candy floss. I was going to say candy canes, like no, that's Christmas jam. So if we can get some of this down first. I really don't have enough room to do this up here. But it almost looks like an umbrella shape on the top parts. And this would come up much further up off the page. But that's just my bad planning. But it does look quite bare, aside from, you know, these bits at the end, which I think's fascinating to look at. And it sounds horrible when you actually try to do it as a tree. It sounds horrible, but that's the way that they look. I maybe put a wee bit of colour in at the background here. Try and thicken this up a little bit. I can hear the boys outside on the quad bike zooming about. It's really weird not having Mr. Jem here. I did actually have to go out to work yesterday, which is something that I actually try and avoid now. The plan was never for me to have to work out on the farm anyway. And obviously if the boys need help, I'll go and help them. That's not a problem. And yesterday was one of those days. So we had to move cattle over a few fields, and we got halfway through moving them and the heavens opened and we got absolutely drenched. So I ended up very soggy. And I didn't even have my wellies on, you know, my waterproof boots. I've got, it's like riding boots I normally wear, that, you know, they come up sort of to just below your knee, and they're a weird sort of like, they're not suede and they're not leather, they're kind of somewhere in between. It's like I don't know. Anyway, they are waterproof, but they are absolutely caked in mud almost up to the very top of the boot. So I was not equipped properly yesterday for that, but it was fine. We got the cows moved. The bull was a bit reluctant. He didn't want to go, but we made him go. Just took a little bit of persuasion, a bit of flapping the old arms and shouting at him, like, go on, go with the girls, because the cows were all away, and he just stayed behind and wanted to meander about. Right, there we go, that looks quite good. So I'm imagining that under here there's maybe a little bit of greenery off to the side, so we'll use up this rather vibrant sort of more viridian or hooker's green. So let's have a little pathway. Oh, that goes quite well with the pink as well. How nice is that? So this would be like the verge. And I'll just pop this in. So I'm just trying to give the sort of impression of this. I'm not necessarily trying to paint a full picture here, but I might as well use up the paint that we've got. Get some grass in there. And then there's maybe a little pathway. So let's water. I've got a wee smidge of black left here. Can you hear Pip with her nylabone? She's a nuisance. She's an absolute nuisance. And maybe we'll just have some, maybe it's like almost paved. And that disappears away under the trees. And then we can have this ridiculous blue sky. Let's have some continuity across our across our trees here. I'll just pop that into very idyllic. This lovely blossom and sun's in the sky, lovely blue skies. Somebody's going to take a little walk and duck their head under that tree. This one I'm not so sure. not so sure what's happening here. So we can go back in and we can add a little bit more in here now, just layer it up a little bit. Maybe have a little bit of greenery in behind here. Maybe there's a hedgerow further off in the distance. There's some of this type of grass over here as well, so we could pop that in further down. Or maybe it's just another row of bushes or trees in the distance, something like that. Oh, that was a bit heavy-handed, never mind. And we can just fade that out down here. Yeah, why not? So I'm adding quite a bit of water here and the paper is not even sniffing at it. It's great. And there we have it. That is a little tree study in our watercolour sketchbook. I've really enjoyed this and it's something that I'm going to explore a bit more over the next little while and just spend a little bit more time than I have done perhaps today, really working in some details, you know, maybe do these on a slightly bigger scale and with a more familiar set of paints as well. But as you can see, you can get quite substantial results from just a little travel kit and a teeny weeny sketchbook. So I want to thank you very much for coming and hanging out with me today, guys. I've really enjoyed this. It's been quite relaxing actually, and I'm going to see you in the cave really soon for what will be my last filmed video from this top down angle, because the overhead rig has to come down at some point. That doesn't mean that you're going to be out of videos though. Can look forward to more videos once we're moved. Thanks again guys, and bye for now.